QR codes. So I recently drove to a public beach, and I got to the parking lot of a public beach, and it wasn't free. There was, I got out of the car, I saw that, I had to pay for parking. So I went up to the sign, and I decided, I'll just use my phone and, capture the QR code on this public beach, parking sign. There was another option where I could have, texted a certain number and done it that way. But I was like, I'll just use the QR code, because it's a thing, it's a new thing. And I was like, I want to be all hip and happening, because I was kind of late to the whole technology game. I had a flip phone for the longest time. I was like, I'm not getting a smartphone. I resisted to the last second. And then my flip phone wasn't working, or it was no longer supported by the cell phone carriers, and I got, smartphone. And then ironically, the flip phones have made a comeback, and now some of the smartphones have a flip phone design. And but we just get bombarded with new trends, new things. So and when I was standing there, it just happened to be like, like there was some sort of insects, some kind of gnats that were attacking me. So I was getting frustrated, and I hit the QR code, and I forget, I was following the prompts, and then I got frustrated. Like I didn't feel like I had got the signal that I had paid for parking. And I said, forget it, I'm just going to go for a quick swim. I went into the water. I was in the water, and this was in the evening, late afternoon, early evening. And I come out of the water, and just as I'm coming out of the water, I see, the parking officer or attendant, putting like a ticket on my car. But I had my key, and I hit the key so that, they recognized me. And then I came over, and I was like, told them what happened. And they said, oh, if you had caught me just a few seconds before, she wouldn't have issued me the ticket. And then, and I explained, and then in that moment, she sort of coached me through the text option, because I told her that I had trouble with the QR code version. And then I got this receipt that I had paid for parking, and then I drove home. And then the next day, I went on to the city town website, and disputed the parking ticket. So I think it was like a $30 ticket. And it all worked out. Like it all, I was able to dispute it. They waived the fine. And then I said, okay, whatever happened, it's over. Well, then later, I was checking my statement, my credit card statement, well, actually my debit card, and I saw this charge, and it was like from California, and I was like, what is it? It was like $24.99, and I was like, what is this charge? And then, long story short, I figured out that this charge was because of a fake QR code that had been superimposed over the town's beach parking QR code, because it was, outside, and they were able to manipulate the QR code. And so when I used my phone, it, captured my debit card information, and then this charge came up. And then I Googled this company, and it said it was like shady, and that you get these like unknown charges for products and services that you didn't actually ask for. And it was called Glam Fitness. And so then I couldn't figure out where would this charge have come from. And then I don't know how it dawned on me, but I thought, what did it have something to do with my difficulty trying to use the QR code, at the parking lot. So then I, Googled QR code scams, and it was right there on the government website that it was a thing, and that you do have to be careful with, when you go to use a QR code. So, and they're everywhere now, right? So you have to really be careful. Obviously, if it's showing up on your television, it's probably fine, right? But if it's in a public place and there's any chance that it could be manipulated, by someone else, then that's where you got to really be careful with these QR codes. And so I sent the evidence to my credit union. I had to cancel my debit card and have a new card issued, and that takes like 7 to 10 days. So it was a bit of a hassle, but this fraudulent company or entity, they put that $24.99 charge, trying to go under the radar. Then like 2 weeks later, there was $19.99. Then there was another charge, but because I saw it and I, went through everything, I wasn't responsible for those charges, so I didn't end up having to pay that. But there was the hassle of, having to have a new card issued and everything else. So just wanted to, give everybody heads up about, this possibility. And, there's all kinds of scams out there, and, I don't want you to get scammed and have that hassle. And, there's another scam that is out there. You got to be careful with any kind of like part-time job that sounds too good to be true. Even if it's an email coming from like inside your workplace or someone you think you trust, just be careful with that. I'm very curious. So there was something going around at my workplace when I was teaching, and I replied to it. And then this was another type of scam where they sent me a legitimate U.S. bank cashier's check. Now, most of my life growing up, it was, if you had a cashier's check from a bank, that was as good as cash. But it seemed suspicious to me, the details surrounding it. So then I did some research, and I called I said, if you receive a cashier's check from somebody, an entity, person, whatever, is it absolute cash, or do they have the ability to cancel the check? And the answer is they do, right? So it's not as good as cash. There's this ability to, if you deposit it into your account, it could even show up on your account, right? That your balance goes up and you think it's yours, but 2 days later it's gone. So be careful of that. Now, if it's cashier's check and you take it to the bank that issued it, like you're near the bank, and they give you cash, then you're fine. But But if you think it's a check and then you deposit it in your account, that is not in your account until, you know, 48, 72 hours, whatever your bank's policy is. So you got to really, uh, be cautious anytime you receive a check of any kind. It could, it could be the cashier's check, it could be a personal check from somebody. You got to find out what the bank's policy is about how much time does the person or entity that wrote you that check, how much time do they have where they can cancel it and it's actually not your money and it gets withdrawn out of your account. So those are just two scams that one definitely got me and caused a hassle, and then the other one almost got me. I was right on the edge of getting scammed, with that other one. So, and another thing which I found ridiculous because I like to do my own taxes, and you can deduct like gambling losses, right? In the past, maybe not now, but in the past you could say you gambled and lost $1,000, and there was a way to sort of deduct that. But if you got scammed, say $1,000, and you had evidence to support that, and you file a police report and everything like that, because I followed up on these scams and things, you can't deduct that, right? And I just thought that I felt like that's really bad. Like that's a double whammy, right? Like you get scammed, and then you can't even deduct that amount from your taxes. So it's like a double whammy. Like you get hurt twice. And so just be really careful, and I mean there's even fake currency out there too, fake bills and things of that nature. So it's just really try to be vigilant the best you can, and just realize that millions of Americans are getting scammed every year, all different ages, to the tune of billions of dollars. So if it does happen to you, don't feel so bad. It's not like you're the only one that it happens to. It happens to everybody. Doesn't matter how many degrees you have or experience or anything like that. It's just we're constantly being targeted, and it's just a numbers game, and eventually you are going to fall for a scam. But the more you know, the better you're protected. So thanks for watching. Subscribe and like if you wish, and have a great day.